Welcome back, Capital F football fans, to the O&O Sports YouTube channel. Today, we are looking at Week 13 of this college football season. I know the season's already coming to a close. It went by so fast, but we still have college football to go over, so let's go ahead and get into it. But first, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. It does help me out a lot. And hit the other O&O Sports social media accounts to be entered into the 75 or die giveaway challenge. The rules will be on the screen, but basically, if I go over 75% correct predictions on every single college football game this season, you have a chance at $50. And if I go under that same 75% threshold, you have a chance at $100. Go ahead and get entered into that. It's literally free money. And with that out of the way, let's jump into our first matchup this week. It is 8th ranked Oklahoma taking on Missouri at home. Oklahoma is a 7.5 point favorite, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 24-17. And this is a very, very underrated matchup coming into this week, mostly because Oklahoma is coming off a huge upset win against Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and Missouri hasn't been the greatest the past few weeks, but Bo Pribula is expected to return in this game. And I like Matt Zollers, but this team has just looked better when Pribula is their quarterback. So that is a huge get for Missouri this late in the season. And other than that, it is a strength on strength matchup. Now, what do I mean by that? Oklahoma, one of the best rush defenses in the country, if not just the best rush defense. They allow just 2.3 rushing yards per attempt, which is first in the country, and 78.3 rushing yards allowed per game, which is second. And they're facing one of the best rush offenses in the country in Missouri. They have one of the best running backs overall in the country, and Ahmad Hardy, who has over 1,350 rush yards, which is the country's best, with 6.8 yards per attempt, which is the best in the SEC, and 15 touchdowns on the season. And they also have Jamal Roberts, who is also very, very good. One of the most effective change of pace backs in the SEC, nearly 700 scrimmage yards and 5 touchdowns for him. But like I said, they are running into that stout Oklahoma defense, which is also very good in general. They're first in the country in sacks per game, which means Bo Pribula isn't going to have a ton of time to get adjusted, get acclimated coming off of this injury. They're top 40 in opponent completion percentage and top 30 in opponent yards per pass attempt as well. And with this being strength on strength, I have to kind of cancel those out. I don't think Ahmad Hardy and Jamal Roberts will be able to run all over the Oklahoma defense, but it's going to come down to Bo Pribula on offense, taking care of business and making the correct decisions, and the Missouri defense, which has been pretty solid this year, especially in the pass rush. Now, if they can get John Mateer off his game, which he has been already, it seems like the past few weeks, this is more than a capable win for Missouri. But on top of all of that, Oklahoma's defense has almost been its best offense the past 2 weeks. They've generated 6 takeaways in their last 2 matchups against Tennessee and Alabama, 2 very, very good offenses. And I think they can generate 1 or 2 turnovers in this matchup and ultimately get the win 27-16. And next this week, it is one of the biggest Big Ten matchups, formerly Pac-12 matchups of this season. It is 6th ranked Oregon taking on 16th ranked USC in Eugene. Oregon is a 10.5 point favorite at home, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 35-24. And this game actually does intrigue me a lot more than I thought it would coming into this breakdown. And that's because this is good on good. Oregon's pass defense, that secondary has been elite. One of, if not the best secondaries in college football this season. And they're taking on an elite USC pass offense. And last week, USC really exceeded my expectations. I thought Iowa would be able to get pressure on Maiyava and would be able to kind of force Mekhi Lemon out of this ballgame, but they were not successful. Mekhi Lemon had 10 receptions for 153 yards and a touchdown. And that's going to be the matchup of the football game for this game once again for the Trojans. If they can get the ball to Mekhi Lemon frequently, their offense should be in very, very good shape. But that is a big if, because like I said, when the defense exploits that matchup and focuses on Mekhi Lemon, tries to take him out of the ball game, USC's offense really struggles. We saw it against Nebraska, who is also one of the best secondaries, one of the best pass defenses in the country, but USC was able to win that matchup on the ground. But Oregon has an even better pass defense and a better secondary than Nebraska. First in opponent pass yards per attempt, first in opponent pass yards per game, second in opponent completion percentage for the Ducks. And what makes me nervous for USC is they have not been particularly good at stopping the run this year, whereas Oregon has been one of, if not the best rushing offense in the country. They're first in rush yards per attempt on average, and they average nearly 200 yards per game. And ultimately, I do think they are able to force Jaden Maiava away from Mekhi Lemon. And when they do that, they are pretty effective at stopping the run themselves. So I don't think USC has a ton of success offensively. To me, this is a script built for Oregon domination. I have the Ducks winning 38-20. And next, we're jumping back to the SEC to look at an underrated matchup in 12th ranked Vanderbilt taking on Kentucky. Vanderbilt is a 9.5 point favorite, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 31-21. And you might hear those names and not think much of this matchup, but Kentucky has quietly been playing very good football recently. They are 3-0 undefeated in the month of November, and they are outscoring their opponents in November 90-20. So they're scoring points on top of playing elite defense. And that's coming off the back of one of the most underrated running back tandems in the SEC. It's Seth McGowan and Dante Dowdell. Over 1,300 scrimmage yards for the two of them with 15 combined touchdowns. And they're going to be looking to do the same thing with those guys in this matchup. Cutter Boley has been a pretty effective game manager at times for Kentucky, but I do not think the game is going to be won by his arm. It's going to be won on the ground with those two guys if they do end up winning this matchup. But with that, they are meeting a very solid Vandy front seven. They've played at a good to elite level all season. They have some great linebackers that can really stretch the field. So I don't know if we're going to see a 200+ yard rushing performance from them, but they don't necessarily need that. But in my opinion, the biggest X factor in this matchup is, of course, Diego Pavia, the Heisman dark horse candidate. And like I said, he's going up against a defense that has been playing borderline elite the past few weeks. They do force about 2 sacks per game, which is pretty solid, but they're also only about 90th in passing yards allowed per attempt. And with how Vanderbilt's offense is designed, they're going to force Diego Pavia out of the pocket. They're going to force quick reads in the RPO game, and they're going to do it very effectively. So it's not a huge worry that they're going to be able to get to Diego Pavia in this matchup. On top of that, Kentucky just hasn't been great at holding onto the ball. They're bottom 15 in the country in giveaways per game. And with playoff implications still on the line for Vanderbilt, I have to trust them to win this matchup. I have the Commodores winning 27-17. And next, it is one of the most important ACC matchups this season. It is 15th ranked Georgia Tech taking on Pitt. Georgia Tech is a 2.5 point favorite at home, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 33-30. This is the number 1 ACC team in Georgia Tech taking on the number 3 ACC team. Georgia Tech has a chance to clinch an ACC title berth with a win here, and Pitt, of course, has a chance to stay alive with just one loss in ACC play. But the biggest question for this matchup is, will Pitt's rush defense, who has been borderline elite this year, be able to stop the multifaceted, dynamic Georgia Tech rush offense led by Haynes King? And like I said, Pitt has had an elite rush defense, just 2.8 yards per rush attempt so far for opponents this season. But we saw last week, Notre Dame was able to walk into the building and run all over them. Jeremiah Love had a very solid game. So we've seen elite rush offenses be able to kind of break that dynamic for the Pittsburgh Panthers. And that could happen in this one. Georgia Tech has an elite rush trio with Haynes King over 800 total yards and 14 touchdowns at quarterback, Malachi Hosley 720 scrimmage yards and 7 touchdowns, and Jamal Haynes with 650 scrimmage yards and 4 touchdowns himself. And on top of that, as a passer, Haynes King has been exactly what you need him to be. He's not going to pass for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, but he's going to do exactly what the offense needs him to keep the defense honest. On top of that, Georgia Tech doesn't turn the ball over super often. Georgia Tech doesn't make bad decisions, typically passing the football either. And what really sells me for Georgia Tech in this matchup is the red zone. Georgia Tech has been elite inside the red zone, one of the best offenses inside the red zone in the country, and pretty good defensively as well, whereas Pitt has been one of the worst red zone defenses in the country, around 127th in red zone scoring opportunities allowed. And I think with Georgia Tech being able to churn out drives and get in the red zone, I think they obviously have a lot of success with that matchup mismatch. I have the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets winning and covering 34-27. And last this week, it is another very important conference matchup out of the Big 12. It is Cincinnati taking on the 11th ranked BYU Cougars. BYU is a 2.5-point favorite on the road, which means FanDuel has them winning at about 27-26. Once again, second in the Big 12 in BYU and sixth in the Big 12 in Cincinnati. Both of these teams can stay alive with a win in this matchup. And in this matchup, we are looking at two of the most effective rushing offenses in the country, which I love to see. I just love these kinds of offenses. And ironically, we've covered a ton of them in this video. Vanderbilt, Georgia Tech, Cincinnati, BYU, all super fun offenses to watch in my opinion. And for BYU in their rush offense, they are led by LJ Martin, who I will say is one of the most underrated running backs in football. I think he is easily a day 2 pick in the NFL draft if he does declare. And with him, it is of course Bear Backmeyer. He's burst onto the scene and really had a very, very good season so far. For those two, over 1,500 scrimmage yards and 16 touchdowns. But Cincinnati has been similarly successful on the ground. Tawi Walker as their lead back with Evan Pryor still injured. Brendan Sorsby at quarterback being a very solid dual threat quarterback. Those two have combined for over 1,100 scrimmage yards and 14 touchdowns. And if Evan Pryor does come back this week, which is looking somewhat likely to happen, you can add an extra 500 yards and 3 touchdowns of volume to those numbers. And one of the most important things to note in this matchup is BYU is coming off a huge home win over TCU, maybe their best win of the season so far, but they are going on the road to Cincinnati, a team who did lose at home last week to Arizona, but who has been pretty solid playing at home this year. And it will be interesting to see if with that home advantage, Cincinnati is able to flip the script on BYU. BYU traditionally this season has been a team that's willing to hold on to the ball for a quarter, go on a 15-play, 11-minute drive to run down the entire third quarter and force you into that kind of matchup with them. They remind me a lot of Iowa in that aspect. They're going to hold on to the football. They're not going to be careless, and they're just going to churn out drives, play field positioning, and settle for 3 or punt it if they have to. Just wind down the clock and take exactly what the defense is willing to give you. And that doesn't give me a ton of hope for Cincinnati because they have lived off the explosive play this season, and BYU is a team who has been great at limiting explosive plays. I believe they're top 30 in the country in doing so. And with that, I think BYU does pull them into that kind of matchup. I think Cincinnati is going to be forced to beat them in their own game, which at home should be doable, but I am not confident in that happening. Ultimately, I have BYU winning this matchup 27-20. And with that, thank you for watching. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it, and hit the other Ono Sports social media accounts to be entered into the 75 or die giveaway challenge. Have a fantastic week of football watching, folks, and I will see you in the next one.